Hello everyone, my name is Putty and welcome back for another edition of Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. Tonight is Night 2 of the Ripcord Invitational, the 20th anniversary of the Ripcord Invitational. 20 long years this tournament has been going, and 20 long years it has been won by the greatest talent in independent territorial wrestling today, because ladies and gentlemen, this is the greatest tournament in territorial American wrestling today. Just like this, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling is the greatest territorial wrestling on the planet today. It's true. You know, it's damn true. We are at the Centerpiece Bridge for only the second time in the history of this tournament, and there are a number of crucial questions that must be answered tonight. Who is the best wrestler on the circuit today? Can the ace take the crown? More importantly, perhaps, in our semi-main event of the evening, the Mid-Atlantic Championship is on the line. Super Gary Walker makes his defense against the return of the monster, James Diaz, who will come out on top as Mid-Atlantic Wrestling Champion. Another question, of course, that must be asked: can Putty keep the plot when he is recording two nights of a tournament a week apart? The answer to all of these questions and more will be found tonight at Centerpiece Bridge. It is, of course, the Ripcord Invitational Finale. Let's get rolling. We kick things off with a Puroresu contest between Akira Arato and Avalanche Takano, and it is the brawl, the brutality that you can expect from Arato and Avalanche Takano, and the two people go at it. The forearms, the chops, the elbows, the punches, the strikes, the kicks, the brainbusters, the brutality of these two men. Akira Arato, the arrogant Black Trunks, plain Black Trunks man that he's always been. He's not necessarily arrogant, but confidence and viciousness, brutality, something that's always got on the wrong side of the 5,000 strong here. Apparently it's the Ace Speedway. I was wrong. It's not Centerpiece Bridge. My apologies. We're at the Speedway for only the third time in the company's history. We've never hosted this event here, at least not to my memory. But Akira Arato getting on the bad side, of course, of the Ace Speedway faithful, as he tends to the brutal, vicious, aggressive style of Akira Arato, and he's going up against the more colourful Avalanche Takano, a man who is traded on fighting spirit, passion, brutality, and glory aside. He is the strong style specialist. He knows he has to take punishment to give punishment, and he sits in there, taking every forearm Akira Arato could possibly throw at him, and sending his strikes back, sending those brutal assaults back at Akira Arato, the wrestler, former Sam Keith Classic winner. Tonight, Akira Arato will not get the better of Avalanche Takano, as Takano gets his place in the semi-finals. I believe might be the first Japanese individual to have ever made it to a Ripcord Invitational semi-final. I might be wrong on that though, but Avalanche Takano books his slot in the semi-final as Animal Harker, who is on comms, has been having these issues with Akira Arato, doesn't do anything nebulous, but Akira Arato is constantly distracted by his presence at ringside, and Avalanche Takano is able to pick up the victory using that distracted mindset of the wrestler with his Avalanche Takano, or Mountain Takano, sorry. Move on to our second quarterfinal match. Oh no, before that, Akira Arato brutalizes Avalanche Takano. Picks him out after the match, the bell rings, and Avalanche Takano, the kind of sportsman that he is, offers his hand to Akira Arato. Akira Arato, big boot to Takano, stares directly in the face of Animal Harker at ringside as he chokes out the big man, brings him down to his knees almost, and then hits him with a big penalty kick straight to the face and chest of Avalanche Takano. Avalanche Takano, of course, the man in the semi-finals later tonight, but he is not looking at his full strength as he heads into a very difficult encounter. Who will he meet there? We will find out in a minute as Sid Collier takes on Rocky Weatherfield, and in a decent match indeed, these two go at it. Very technical encounter from these guys. Rocky Weatherfield, the colourful character from California, one of the hottest rising stars in the business today, taking it to Sid Collier with the fast pace, the aggression that he's used to, and he seems to have the upper hand in the first few minutes of this matchup, but Sid Collier is not someone to be taken down easily. Sid Collier, nasty, gritty grappler that we've seen over the last couple of years, can really pick up victories where he's not really supposed to. And he's able to stay in there with Rocky Weatherfield, although there's no way he's a better wrestler, and indeed Rocky Weatherfield definitely constantly pushes back against Sid Collier's offense. And it's looking like Rocky Weatherfield's going to get the victory, but suddenly we have a ref bump. I guess Rocky Weatherfield picks up Sid Collier for a fireman's carry. His legs go swinging, and down goes Jay Fair, down to the mat, our senior official. And we don't get a spare referee out quite as quickly as we'd like, and out from the crowd comes a masked thug. Just a man in a mask, quite a tall man, quite a built man, could definitely pass for a wrestler. Out from the crowd, a masked thug with a pipe just starts brutalizing the leg of Rocky Weatherfield. Nasty steel pipe blows to the knee, just caving in the leg of Rocky Weatherfield. Sid Collier has no idea. At least he feigns having no idea. And he's actually cowering in the corner from this masked thug. And the masked thug walks on, and Sid Collier locks in that Texas cloverleaf as Jay Fair gets back up to his feet. Counts the submission, and Sid Collier will be facing Avalanche Takano in the semi-finals. As we move on to another match, for some reason I feel like I've booked one of the semi-finals wrong. So I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna get that anti-spoiler screen up a second, because no, I was right. I was right. This is silly of me. I got confused. Like I said, I'm recording these very, very separate from each other. And I got confused. I was like, wait, no, the semi-final is totally not what I thought it was, but I'm right. I was thinking of the quarter-final, which, anyway, we'll head back to the match. Sorry about that. Dewey Archer takes on the Traveler, Roger Brown, of course, a man who proves you don't have to have a house, you don't have to have a home, you don't have to have a settled living to be a great professional wrestler, to have that heart, to have that passion, to follow your dreams, and he goes from territory to territory, proving he's the guy. One of the biggest underdogs in the history of Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, and he gives it his all here in the quarterfinal, but he doesn't quite make it, as he's taken down by the superior grappling of Dewey Archer, the Architect. One of the best technical wrestlers on the scene today, and indeed locks in that legendary Proton Lock and makes it to the semifinals. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our final quarterfinal of the evening. It is Logan Wolfsbane taking on Matthew Keith, and it is a good match indeed. Matthew Keith, Logan Wolfsbane, a long match, a long technical clinic from two of the greatest technical wrestlers in the business today. It's very obvious that they don't quite click. They don't have that chemistry, but there's still some brutality there. We've seen Logan Wolfsbane resorting to vicious, brutal, nasty, crunching submission maneuvers. You know, there was a time not long ago where Logan Wolfsbane would refrain from using his full power, scared of breaking legs, breaking limbs of other people, because that's what he did to Froshore a couple of years ago. Actually, it was about half a decade ago now that Logan Wolfsbane broke the leg of Froshore, and of course put hard times on him and his family, but gone are the predispositions. Gone are the limitations on the power of glorious Logan Wolfsbane, and he just brutalizes the ace, brutalizes the king of Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, Sam Keith's baby boy, Matty Keith. And indeed, in this main event, Matthew Keith gets the ringer put on him. A grueling, long affair, but Matthew Keith, one of the strongest wrestlers in the business today, is able to put up a fight against glorious Logan Wolfsbane, locking every technical wrestling maneuver under the sun, and in the end locking in that legendary Proton Lock. Matthew Keith picks up the victory, booking his spot, the final spot in the semi-finals this evening. Cool. Are we moving into a semi-final? Well, first of all, we have a promo from Matthew Keith, who gets on the mic and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is my crowning achievement. Tonight is my night. I've told you all for the last couple of months since I've been back here in the Mid-Atlantic that I am the ace. I'm the guy. I'm the man. Well, I gotta tell you, Logan Wolfsbane, you put up one hell of a fight, and you may be glorious. You may be a good guy. You may be a bad guy. You're not the guy. That's me. And quite frankly, I don't care how many people it is, whether it's 15 other men in this tournament, whether it's 29 other men in the battle for the Mid-Atlantic, or whether it is 3 other teams in the Sam Keith Classic, it doesn't matter. Because when Matthew Keith is in town and when there's a tournament up on that board, you better believe the favourite, the guy, the man to win it is Matthew Keith, and we've had a lot of upsets in this tournament. We've had a lot of upsets in this business over the last couple of years. Gary Walker, I gotta congratulate you. Nobody ever thought you'd make it this far, and if you lose your title tonight, which, let's be honest, is likely, you've done your best. But tonight is not a night for upsets. Tonight is not a night for underdogs. It's a night for the ace. Tonight is a night that the trophy, that grand old trophy, is lifted by a worthy challenger. You see, I consider this business, I consider this promotion, I consider the title here my birthright. And I don't mean to be arrogant and cocky when I say that, but I'm doing this for family honor. I'm doing this for my history, my training, my style, and tonight there is a new name on an old trophy, and that new name is Matthew fucking Keith. Thank you. Matthew Keith, very confident tonight, but he's got to get past Dewey Archer in the semi-finals. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on to a squash match. Well, it's not a squash match, but it's a squash match, as Dennis Bartlett goes down to the Saint, formerly the Sinner, Ruby Velasquez, of course, a man who had a vicious, vindictive attitude on the independent scene over the last couple of years, one of the most brutal superstars, but never really got too far. But now he found his manager, Holy Hardy Goldsworth, and now he is the Saint. He is no longer the Sinner, Ruby Velasquez, and Ruby picks up the victory tonight with God's last gift, the Cradle Pile Driver, defeating Dennis Bartlett in a very, very short match. Bring that vindictive, righteous fury down on the head of Dennis Bartlett. That's our cooldown match as we head into our first semi-final match. Avalanche Takano, Sid Collier, they go in, and of course Avalanche Takano has been kicked to God knows how far. He went through a grueling, strong-style matchup in our opening contest of the evening and got more than his money's worth afterwards. He is in no state to compete, and it is obvious. He has probably had 3 or 4 concussions already tonight. But he insists, as someone of his pedigree, someone of his history would, that he is able to fight. He shows that fighting spirit, that heart, that a Puresu star like Avalanche Takano is always going to, maybe against his better judgment, maybe against his better decision making. There's definitely a chance that Avalanche Takano is going to this match with an incredible disadvantage and an incredible chance to really hurt himself. But that's not going to stop someone like Avalanche Takano. But sadly, he's against an opponent, probably the worst opponent to go into with an injury, because Sid Collier doesn't see a man, he sees a selection of bullseyes. And we give Sid Collier a lot of shtick. We give Sid Collier a lot of hassle for being a bit of a bastard, and he is a bastard. There's no doubt about it. But not only is he, one of the most grueling, gritty grapplers in the business, he is slick Sid Collier. And he can lock in a ton of maneuvers. He is one of the most slick, one of the most smooth technical wrestlers in the business today. He was the base of the Dynamite Express. He was the brains of the Dynamite Express. He took one of the best tag teams in Mid-Atlantic history and he made them a global franchise. And when you give Sid Collier a piece of meat that's hobbling, that's injured, that's hurt, you better believe he's going to pick it apart. That's exactly what Sid Collier does tonight, picking apart Avalanche Takano limb by limb by limb. And it's not long before Takano is locked in with the Texas Cloverleaf. And there's no way he's getting out of that in his current state. Sid Collier books his first ever Ripcord Invitational Final. It's a pretty big upset for him to even get there. But who will he be facing? We have a technical wrestling clinic, one of the greatest matches we've ever seen in Mid-Atlantic wrestling, between two of the greatest technical wrestlers in the history of Mid-Atlantic wrestling. But it is another long and grueling contest between Matthew Keith and his opponent in this tournament. We call him the guy, and he is one of the best in the business. There's no doubt about that. But unlike Sid Collier, unlike even Avalanche Takano, unlike Ruby Velasquez we saw earlier tonight, Matthew Keith can't finish guys off in a reasonable amount of time. Maybe it's his showboating, maybe if it's his confidence. We heard him in the promo earlier tonight. He's a cocky bastard. He's nice to everyone he meets. He signs fans' autographs. He kisses babies. He's a good guy. He never cheats. He's always got his principles. There's no doubt about it. We can't call Matthew Keith a bad guy. He's not like Dewey Archer. I mean, Dewey Archer even is not that bad of a guy, but he's not like Sid Collier. He's not like Davis Wayne Newton. He's not like Fro Sure. He's not a bad guy. is Matthew Keith. He's just confident. He's assured of himself. But here's the thing, he's flashy. We've seen these kind of matches before. They have become a staple of Dewey and Ernest Youngman's feud over the last couple of years. Matthew Keith, of course, last time he faced Dewey Archer at Where It All Begins again last year, it was a very different environment. Matthew Keith was very on top of Dewey Archer, but this match is very similar to those Archer-Ernest Youngman matches, where it's anything you can do, I can do better kind of thing. Two men showing off their technical prowess, not trying necessarily to control a match, not trying necessarily to inflict pain on their opponent, just trying to show how good they are at technical wrestling, escape after escape, a mixture of technical holds without any real throughput, any real line bringing them together. It's very much bravado and testosterone gone wild as these two just try to show off to each other and the 5,000 strong here at the Ace Speedway. And that gives Dewey Archer time. And you start to see as the match develops, Dewey Archer is actually the man with the strategy in this match. Dewey Archer is the man who's willing to put in those consistent holds. Starts working down the leg of Matthew Keith. Starts working down the leg, probably going for the jugular, trying to get the win. If he can lock in that leg really tightly in the proton lock, which is mainly a neck hold, mainly a head hold, but it's got a leg component to it. Dewey Archer thinks he could possibly get a win there. Also, maybe hobbling the leg hobbles Matthew Keith's quicker offense. We've seen Matthew Keith, he's able to be quick. He's a big lad, Matthew Keith. One of the biggest lads in the business, not in the business today. You know, he's not a guy like Giant Koklov or Giant Brody or... Brody? That's not a thing. Bruce the Giant Bruce. Or, Marat Koklov, not Giant Koklov. He's not those kind of guys. He's not a Tyson Bane. He's not a T-Rex. He's not a Petr Novak. But he's a big lad. He's like his dad. He's bigger than his dad was. He's a heavyweight, a proper heavyweight. But he's a bit like Cameron Jones in that when he gets going, he can be a bit of a bull in a china shop. And so Dewey Archer trying to hobble that leg is definitely a successful strategy. However, the problem with hobbling the leg is you're not going to stop the proton lock. That's one of the things that some of the opponents of both Dewey, Matthew, Greg Gage, Sam Keith, all of the famous users of the proton lock, they've always been susceptible to arm work. That's why Ernest Youngman had probably just a natural advantage against Dewey Archer, is because he worked the arm a lot with that cross-face chicken wing. Obviously more of a neck hold, but worked the arm a lot too. And that, if you can work the arm of a proton lock user, that's going to be very difficult for them to fully lock it in. And Dewey doesn't do that, and that's probably a crucial mistake, because if you give Matthew Keith the proton lock, that is the only weapon that he needs in his arsenal to beat anybody on the planet today. I'm confident in saying that. And that's what he does. He locks in that proton lock, and there is no way, I don't think anybody in the world today can beat Matthew Keith if he's got access to that proton lock. And Matthew Keith locks it on, and Dewey Archer taps out. And Matthew Keith is our second finalist this evening in what is going to be a tasty technical matchup between the dirty, the gritty, the slick Sid Collier, Chicago native, one of the greatest technical wrestlers Chicago wrestling has ever seen, against the former Chicago wrestling champion Matthew Keith. Very interesting finals tonight. Who will lift the old trophy for the 20th time this evening? We are guaranteed to have a new name on the old trophy, but will it be the Ace? Or will it be the dastardly Sid Collier? We'll find out later tonight. First of all, I believe we have a championship match, and I believe it is up next. As indeed, we have a rematch from the much acclaimed Where It All Begins Again main event. The Ace Speedway is palpable. The excitement in the air is indeed palpable, is thick, as we are having one of the most anticipated rematches of the decade. James Diaz, of course, was one of the most dominant, one of the most vicious Mid-Atlantic wrestling champions in history. Gary Walker seems to beat every odds that are put in front of him. It feels like when he was in the battle for the Mid-Atlantic, he was number 0. He was not even considered to win it. He won it. It feels like when he went in there, Where It All Begins Again, James Diaz said, "I'm not underestimating you. I'm just going to beat you." That's what James Diaz said to Gary Walker. Gary Walker said, "No. I will fight against everything you have, and I will win." It was 4,000 to 1 for Gary Walker to walk out as champion. He walked out as champion. The odds are slimmer tonight. The odds are slim tonight because, of course, they are. You know, you introduce a situation where an unbeaten champion is going up against an underdog challenger. Of course, the odds are going to be much bigger than a champion defending a little uneasily against a very dominant challenger. But at the same time, I think a lot of people in the business, a lot of people in the industry looking at this match and saying, I think maybe Gary Walker might have a harder time tonight because you're going up against someone like James Diaz who almost feels like he gets stronger with age. James Diaz, 23-ish, I think. One of the fastest rising superstars in the history of the business. It's easy to forget how young James Diaz is because he won those titles so young. But he has got his prime ahead of him. And that's what happens tonight as we start this match. The bell rings. James Diaz, no lariats, no clotheslines, no shoulder tackles. We see James Diaz a lot of times. He comes out the blocks and he hits hard. It's not what we see tonight. We see almost like a tiger prowling, ready to strike. A very defensive James Diaz. He's waiting for Gary Walker. James Diaz got rocked last time. James Diaz took some really nasty hits from Gary Walker. If there's one piece of Gary Walker's arsenal that we know is really strong, it's his strikes. You know, Gary Walker, he's got that passion, he's got that heart, and he's got that conditioning. That means that when he punches you, you get hit hard. And indeed, James Diaz knows that, and James Diaz knows that Gary Walker can punch his way out of a paper bag. And he's going to wait, and he's going to watch, and Gary Walker, not used to this. Gary Walker is used to being the defender. And even though Gary Walker definitely been an underdog in a lot of the matches he's had over his career, he's gotten kind of used to it. It's almost like, someone like Angry Gilmore, Tom Gilmore. Almost like a Tom, you see how like out of sync with the Seaverse I am these days? It's almost like a Tom Gilmore. You know, Tom Gilmore made a career, 20 years or so, out of being the underdog. He went to Japan, he won the Burning Junior Championship, he came back to America, he became the SWF World Heavyweight Champion. Every single step of the way he was the underdog, but there becomes a sense of system, a sense of style with being the underdog. You wrestle a certain way. And that's what Gary Walker's kind of got used to. So seeing James Diaz being defensive, waiting for Gary to make a strike, it really puts Gary off. But he gets in there. He gets really close to James Diaz. He tries to throw that punch because he knows if he can land a punch on James Diaz early, it will start the match in his favor. So he gets in there. He tries to throw those punches. And it's reckless because you never want to be in James Diaz's guard. If there's something we've seen since the matches with Ernest Youngman 3 or 4 years ago, James Diaz is actually one of the best technical throwers in the business. There's no doubt about it. And Gary Walker gets in close. Mistake number one. Big belly-to-belly suplex. Thrown across the ring as Gary Walker as James Diaz, once again, defensive. Big belly-to-belly. Big damage done. But he's not going to capitalize on it. He's not going to pounce. Because that gives Gary Walker a chance to punch him. And James Diaz doesn't want to get punched by Gary Walker. He knows he doesn't. So James Diaz, again, just breathes. Gets in his corner. Defensive. Gary Walker, Gary Walker doesn't know how to attack. So he's just getting in there again. Here's a punch. Nope. German suplex. Second German suplex. And suddenly it's starting to look a lot like where it all begins again. James Diaz is seriously on top of Gary Walker, and Gary Walker is getting dropped on his head. Brainbuster. DDT. Gary Walker is getting thrown through a loop, and we start to think maybe it was a fluke. James Diaz, one of the best athletes in the business, 4 more months of his, or 2 more months, 3 more months, whatever it is, of his training. Maybe it's enough. Maybe Gary Walker just not good enough to hang with someone like James Diaz when he's had enough time to prepare. So, and that sort of foreboding feeling as James Diaz grows into the match starts to control the pace. Picking up Gary Walker, another German, throws him into the turnbuckle, starts throwing strikes of his own. Chops, elbows, forearms to the face of Gary Walker, starts busting open. Super Gary Walker. James Diaz hits the other turnbuckle, big splash to the corner. Gary Walker is getting dominated, but now we start to see the fire of Gary Walker. Now we start to see where Gary Walker excels when he's behind, when he's on bottom, when he is defending. We start to see that Gary Walker does punch his way out of that corner, fires his way back out of the corner with punches of his own, starts to land those hits on the jaw, starts to land those hits on the nose of James Diaz. Gary Walker is fighting his way back into the match, and that's the only way he knows how to do it. But James Diaz is able to counter. Every time Gary Walker seems to get momentum going, big belly to belly, big vertical suplex to Gary Walker. until finally Gary Walker gets a break. James Diaz Irish whips him into the ropes. Gary Walker fires back with a lariat. It's not quite the impact we saw on the clothesline at Where It All Begins Again, but he manages to knock James Diaz down. And when you see someone the size of James Diaz, that it's sometimes enough to really turn the momentum in Gary's favour. And Gary starts to fight back with punches, with kicks, with spinning kicks. Starts to try and work over the knees of James Diaz. Starts to slow down the monster. More kicks, more punches as Gary tries to fire back into the match. And suddenly, as we enter like the last 5 minutes of the match, because remember the Where It All Begins Again match was a little bit shorter than this. Gary has lasted longer, or I guess James has lasted longer in this match than I did at Where It All Begins Again. And you start to see that these two are actually a lot more evenly matched than you'd ever expect, because for a long time before this moment, it was either Gary is on top or James is on top. But at this moment in the last 5 minutes, they're just trading. Lariats. James is standing after a lariat from Gary. James hits the ropes, hits Walker. Gary Walker is standing, just says bring it on to James Diaz. And for the first time ever, Gary Walker and James Diaz are standing, staring at each other, looking like equals. It is an incredible moment, as Gary Walker has evolved so much in 3 months from being the ultimate underdog to standing toe-to-toe with one of the greatest wrestlers in Mid-Atlantic wrestling history. And Gary Walker starts to fire up, starts to drop James Diaz on his head. Vertical suplex from Gary Walker as he powers up. The bionic clothesline misses. We see another sequence that's similar to Where It All Begins Again as James Diaz goes for a lariat of his own. Gary Walker ducks and fires up and says, this is time, this is it. And he puts James Diaz down with a bionic clothesline. And more authoritatively than we saw in October, Gary Walker retains the Mid-Atlantic Championship. So Gary Walker is the champ. He's the guy. It ain't no fluke. He's sick of people talking him down, and I think he's got an argument to say he's the best around. But there is another championship to be decided this evening. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I believe it is now time for your finale of the Ripcord Invitational 2025. The 20th edition of the tournament is our main event of the evening. Matthew Keith and Sid Collier go head-to-head. And Matthew Keith has had a long night. Matthew Keith has had a long, long night of technical wrestling. And there's no doubt as he goes into this match, he's going to be firing on all cylinders. He's going to be as confident, as passionate as he has ever been. Matthew Keith is not a man to lose the smile on his face. But he's going up against Slick Sid Collier, who is a down-to-earth, gritty grappler. We've seen it time and time again. And Sid is going to pull Matthew. He knows Matthew Keith has been wrestling for 40 minutes before this match even starts tonight. Matthew Keith has wrestled over an hour this weekend. Or this week. It's Tuesday, Monday combination. Okay, we couldn't book Matthew Keith for a weekend, alright? Matthew Keith has been working 60 minutes already this weekend. Over an hour of wrestling for Matthew Keith before this match even starts. And Sid's going to use that. Sid's wrestled a lot less. Sid is a lot fresher as he goes into this match, and he baits Matthew Keith. Starts working really slowly. Starts really wrenching on every limb Matthew Keith has. We saw Dewey Archer in the semi-finals working Matthew Keith's leg. You think Sid Collier's not going to continue that work? You think Sid Collier hasn't seen that tape during the title match? You think Sid Collier gives a shit about Gary Walker's title defense? No, he's sitting in the back. He's watching that semi-final. He's seeing it again. He's watching for that moment where Matthew Keith jumped off the top rope and his knee tweaked a little bit. And Sid's seeing that. He's writing it down. He's coming out here in the final, and he's working over Matthew Keith's leg. And I gotta tell you, Matthew Keith is a great technical wrestler, and he has fought against some of the best in the business. And he's fought toe-to-toe with them. He's just been better than them on the night. But Sid Collier is a very different animal. Sid Collier doesn't do this to be flashy. Sid Collier doesn't do this to prove that he's the best. Sid Collier wants to hurt you. More so than Logan Wolfsbane's aggressive, I can break you kind of thing. Sid Collier knows how to really hurt you. Logan Wolfsbane is going to brutalize you because he's bigger than you. Because he's stronger than you. Sid Collier actually knows what he's doing. And that is terrifying. And that is exactly what Matthew Keith finds out tonight. Because Sid Collier has got every trick up his sleeve. And it's not even cheating. It really isn't. As Sid Collier holds his own and then some against Matthew Keith, and you start to realize that for all the shtick we have given him over the last 10 years plus, he's actually really good at professional wrestling. He's actually really good at technical wrestling. And if he's in there with a guy like Matthew Keith, he's able to work him down, because Matthew Keith is going to play into every hole Sid Collier wants. Oh, it's just an opportunity to escape. Just an opportunity to do something flashy. Matthew Keith is the worst opponent, or Sid Collier is the worst opponent for Matthew Keith, because Sid Collier is going to set technical traps for Matthew Keith and say, escape this. And Matthew Keith's going to do it, because he wants to prove to everyone that he's the guy. But then Sid Collier is just going to lock another one in. And he's going to tire Matthew Keith out. And Matthew Keith goes 25 minutes with Sid Collier, and every step of the way, Sid's got a game plan. Every step of the way, Matthew Keith is falling into every trap that Sid sets. And I usually try to make these matches pretty two-sided. And definitely Matthew Keith gets shine. Of course he does. But it almost feels like he's being completely outplayed the entire time. 25 minutes of Matthew Keith like doing flashy shit. But every single time, if you look closely, Sid Collier is not taking any damage. Sid Collier doesn't take a bump in 25 minutes. He's just moving from hold to hold. Maybe Matthew Keith locks in a couple, but Sid's not in any danger. He's doing it in a way where he's only giving up one limit at a time. You know, he's only letting Matthew Keith lock in an arm bar and then a leg lock. He's never able to really pursue that arm. Every time that Matthew tries to pursue the arm, Sid is protecting it. Sid rolls through and locks Matthew Keith in a leg lock. You know, there's so many ways that Sid Collier is able to really, really smartly trap Matthew Keith into Sid Collier's game plan. Sid Collier, in terms of mind games, squash match. Absolute squash match. Matthew Keith didn't stand a chance tonight in mind games. And Matthew Keith usually excels physically. And he's been wrestling for 65 minutes tonight. And he hasn't got anything left. And you know, there's definitely something to be said that Matthew Keith wrestled a lot tonight. And a fresh Matthew Keith might have beaten Sid Collier. But I don't know. Because Sid Collier had him absolutely destroyed every step of the way. And honestly, this might be an even bigger upset than October's match. Because I don't know how many people would have predicted this. But tonight in our main event of the evening, Sid Collier destroys Matthew Keith. 25 minutes. Submission, Texas Cloverleaf. Sid Collier is the Ripcord Invitational Challenge champion. Matthew Keith is right. There's a new name on the old trophy. But it's not Matthew Keith. Sid Collier lifts the glorious Ripcord Invitational trophy as we go off air. And there is a bittersweet atmosphere in the audience, because some people are like, oh, homegrown MAW dojo guy who went off to do great things around the world with the Dynamite Express, and then came back and won the big one. But there is some serious bittersweet atmosphere, because this felt like Matthew Keith's night. He felt like the uncrowned champion from the start. And he had some incredible matches. Greg Gage, Dewey Archer, Logan Wolfsbane. Felt like Sid Collier was just a checkbox. But this was not to be. Maybe next year, Matty. Maybe next year. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you did, please leave a thumbs up, check out the rest of the series, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're feeling especially generous and you particularly enjoyed the show, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. Sorry, I muted my mic and then unmuted it to cough. That was stupid of me. If you want to hear me ramble on Twitter, there's a link to that in the description too. This is, I think, the second longest episode in the series, so I apologize for the rough voice at the end there. I basically did 3 main events, and I give main events a lot of time talking-wise, so that's why my voice is really screwed, and why we had such a long show today. But I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun booking this tournament. I had a lot of time booking this tournament, and I have a lot of ideas for what I want to do with the final year of this season of the series before I take a big break from it, and maybe even never continue it. So I have a lot of cool ideas this year. Let me know what you guys thought. And in the next episode, we have the Wrestling Classic, which I'm not sure what we're actually going to do for as terms of a card. But, as has become tradition, Sid Collier is going to pick which of the Confederation of the Territories championships he wants to challenge for. I hope you guys will join me then, and I hope you guys enjoyed this tournament this year. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And I will see you guys then. Next time. Jesus, this outro is really bad. As you can tell, I haven't recorded in a while. Okay, I'm going to click the stop recording button now. See ya.